Welcome, everyone. I'd like to introduce my good friend and mentor, Mark Stross. Mark is America's technologist, and he's the visionary behind some of the most groundbreaking visual technology displayed in iconic public spaces across America, places like Penn Station, the World Trade Center, and NBC's Tonight Show. But his work goes so much further beyond invention. He's also committed to safeguarding these creations, ensuring they stand untarnished and protected. Mark is not only the most qualified, but in my opinion, he's the most passionate person I know in the digital realm when it comes to creating these comprehensive solutions that protect children. Mark, I don't think I've ever told you this, but you and your wife have shown me what it means to stand for the truth, for integrity, and the best interests of humanity. So I'm grateful to be here today with you and to introduce you to people who probably already know you, but may not know these various sides of you that I'm excited to explore today.
Well, first of all, Kim, thank you for that incredible introduction. I am so excited today to not only be talking to you, but talking to everyone, because ultimately, my mission, especially as I'm getting older and I'm starting my final big chapter of my life and my mission, is to be helpful, is to actually pay back society for all the cool things society's allowed me to do. I mean, I have been able to stand at the Dallas Cowboys and observe the video boards my company put in. I have been able to be, as you said, at Penn Station in the World Trade Center and cried when my creations went live. But the most important part of all this experience was I was working for America. I was trying to make America better. And I was trying to do things with my team and with all the people around me and all the people that helped us become good to actually do things that would make us a better as a country, as a whole, and to improve myself. But as you know, this journey ended in me completely changing my theories of how I was going to operate as a human being. At first, and I could almost say this, and I think a lot of people are guilty of this, that when you're young, it's all about your personal ego and about what you're creating and about you. But in this journey, it went from my creations to realizing, oh my gosh, what have we done? How is a regular person going to cope with the adversity that we have now beset upon everyone with these technologies, social media, just technologies to put everything in the cloud? The idea of ownership. And if you buy a game and you get a license, do you actually own it? Or is it just a license? And what does that mean? And what does it mean to society if everything goes online and you end up not owning anything? And in this quest to actually think about these issues, I suddenly realized my questions should be answered. And if I answer those questions, I might be able to help others with their life and with their problems and actually do something that's relevant. So, the reason I'm so excited today is we have a new administration coming in. And I understand that for some of you, having the Republicans come back to power is extremely detrimental, and it really hurts. Um, it hurts you, and you feel that the country is going to heck. But I want to explain to everyone that 4 years ago, the Republicans felt the same way that you do today if you're a Democrat, and this cycle repeats. What I think we all should be fair and honest about, should we, because we disagreed with people in the last 4 years, gone so out of our way to cancel people just because they had views that we don't like? And that, as a nonpartisan fighter, is why I'm in this race, in this fight. It's to claim back our personal freedoms, to allow us to be able to have our opinions and not to be canceled, but be loved by adversaries, be loved by people that disagree with us. Because what they have to realize, and I am bound and determined to try to make this happen in my lifetime, is for people to realize bad ideas and good ideas help create beautiful, fine ideas. You have to have good and bad in order to know the difference. And if you don't put all ideas on the table, how will you ever know what really is the best idea? And if you're going to squelch 50% of the ideas just because you don't like them, you ultimately might not hear the best idea of all. So, from my perspective, I'm not going to bet against American future by suggesting all Republicans, for example, in the last 4 years were wrong, nor would I suggest that all Democrats are wrong. And that is why the Digital Bill of Rights is super important to me, because I want to make sure that all of us get an opportunity to have a say, to be able to talk about our perspective and share it with others so others can be exposed to your view and maybe enhanced by your view, educated by your view. And if you don't have the opportunity to speak, then no one will be able to be educated. And that is why this Digital Bill of Rights needs to be passed by Congress and the Senate, and the government needs to get this thing done. Democrats have talked about it for 4 years on and off, and we've heard about it from different people. But the idea of a right to privacy, an idea of the right to control one's data, the idea of a right to transparency, and then finally a right to digital freedom of speech, culminating in equal access. Those are my 5 principles: equal access, freedom of speech, transparency, control one's data, own it, and then finally, ultimate privacy guaranteed.
Mm. So powerful. I'm really excited to unpack that with you because I know you've been talking about the Digital Bill of Rights for years now. It's in your book. You've been very ahead of the game for years now. And I want to unpack that and also simplify it so that people understand what it is and why it's needed and what they're at risk of now without it. But first, before we even go into there, I want to share some background with the audience so that they understand where you and I are coming from and why we've even joined forces in this mission. It goes so much further beyond digital safety for both of us, but it really does come down to digital safety, which is an interesting start and end point. So I met you and your amazing wife, Kathleen, maybe several years ago. We were involved in a different work project. We connected pretty quickly. We got along very well. There's not many people who talk faster than me, so I was fascinated with not only your intelligence, but the way you express things and are so animated. So I was fascinated with a lot of your ideas. And we also got pretty vulnerable with each other about our upbringing and our background. And it was interesting, unexpected perhaps, that we both shared a pretty similar path, very different experiences, but a lot of similarities, not only with childhood trauma and with different obstacles we faced, but our passion and our drive and our work ethic today. So I want people to understand, if they haven't heard, what you've had to say over the last few years, you've been adamant about this message for a while. And I
Yes,
am
I
going
have.
to jump out there and say you've been right about it all. I don't know that there's been anything you've been off point on. And specifically, this Digital Bill of Rights was something so specific, and it's a pretty tall ask. You published it in your book, you've been talking about it a lot in your podcast, and now we're seeing it on the news. We're seeing the president elect discuss it and propose it. So it's a really exciting and fascinating time, not only in the spaces of innovation, but how do you see this being adapted by the public? Do you think people get it, or are we not close there yet?
Unfortunately, I think a great deal of the public, which I'm actually grateful they conduct their lives as regular human beings, they're not into politics, and they don't really look at these issues with the same microscope or magnifying glass that I do or you do, because they're not exposed to some of the issues on a daily basis like I've been. I've been exposed to security issues and the worry about a stadium getting hacked for many years now. So, from my perspective, I'm thinking about these issues every day. But a regular person's not going to be thinking about cybersecurity. And I hope they don't, because it's very depressing. It's not something I would want anyone to actually be thinking about on a regular basis. So, to really explain cybersecurity and where we are today and what people think should be thinking about is this way. It's really about innocence, isn't it, Kim? And this is where I get everyone. And I've had people that have accepted this message, and I've had other people that think this is a very, very bold statement and a little harsh. But this is the truth. When you give a child a cell phone, you're exposing them to the world's information. through the wild world web. Wild world web. And on that wild world web, there is everything available to that child. So you're exposing that child to the information of the world. So, parents, everyone listening to me, what does it cost to have a child's innocence lost? It's instant and it can never be regained. That is why I'm doing this. Because I can't save every single child. And Kim and I came to the realization with our upbringing and how hard we had it growing up, for our different issues. We decided that we can't save every child, but what we could do is start saving some of the children. And I use the metaphor of soft drinks. My mission is not to save everyone or to stop everyone from drinking soft drinks, but my mission is to educate everyone and to gently suggest to everyone that soft drinks might not be good for your waistline or your health. Maybe you should use and drink with moderation. Therefore, I would like to see people use all these technologies with moderation and understand how powerful these technologies are. Equally, I want these technology companies to give a fair playing ground to children and to adults and to allow people to delete information that would actually hurt them and stop them from getting employment. I think we should allow grace that if someone does something stupid and it's posted, it should be able to be taken down. And this idea now with tagging that you can have people that can take pictures and tag other people in their pictures, meaning that you could be innocently doing your own thing, not wanting to be in the public eye, be caught on a picture that then, for some reason, gets you into trouble. That is not the kind of world I want to live in. That is extremely dystopian. It is extremely negative. It is an idea that there is always a surveillance state behind you. And it could even be just the innocence of other people's cell phones. But the fact that our technology companies turn that into a surveillance state, and the fact that we created this cancel technology, it's almost a psyop operation. The idea of training us to react in a certain way. It's like we've trained ourselves to react, that if we see political dialogue that we don't like, though people should just be eliminated, canceled. And that I find is extremely, to me, it's so sad. I mean, I was going to say something else, but the truth is, it's sad
It is.
because we're not listening to each other anymore. So, what do I want Americans to do? I want you guys to wake up and realize we've got to protect our children. And we're not going to do that unless all of us become a little bit more responsible about this incredible weapon we give our children, we give ourselves, access, whatever your device is that gives you access to the World Wide Web, that access point, that device that gives you access, be it a cell phone, an iPad, a computer, whatever, it can change your life. It can make your life so much better. And it can also destroy your life. And when you give a gun to someone to maybe shoot, put food on the table, or shoot to kill in a negative way, you have to train the user as to how to operate that device. But we don't train our kids, our adults, our friends how to operate a cell phone. We don't.
Mm, absolutely. I've referred to the internet as a weapon as well. And giving your kid a phone with unlimited, unsupervised access to the internet is like giving your kid a loaded weapon and just saying, okay, good luck, have fun. We need training, we need preparation for that. And we also can't expect a child to be prepared to handle that type of responsibility. So, what we're
That's absolutely
discussing.
right.
Mhm. What we're discussing is also in regards to dialogue, which is something you're really big on. And where it's a little sneak peek, but we're actually starting a podcast called The Dialogue, where we're going to have guests on who can discuss things and we can have civil conversations. Even if we disagree with each other, we can unpack these things and discuss them. And we both believe people should get back to doing that instead of just arguing. Let's talk, let's find solutions. So, when it comes to the Digital Bill of Rights, How do you believe it could help bridge these divides and support open discourse?
Well, to begin with, the first thing Americans are going to have to get used to is that knowledge, facts, are not always convenient, and facts don't always support your narrative. So the first thing we have to do is grow up a little and realize that real facts are impartial. Real facts just tell a story. And we need to start telling the real story of where the American economy is, the amount of the debt America is in, which is around $23 trillion. We need to start having real dialogues about how much money we spend on defense, how much money we spend on education, how much money we spend on supporting the elderly, and then figuring out how much money are we spending abroad and sending to foreign wars and to foreign interventions while we have kids in our country that are suffering, while we have tons of people that don't have homes. And while we have an immigration system that everyone can't agree on, but the bottom line is, even in that system, people are getting hurt every single day. So the problem is, are we going to continue to point fingers at each other as Democrats and Republicans? Or are we going to start realizing the facts need to be honored here and we need to solve these problems with facts? And the truth is, you can't always win, but you can sometimes compromise to create a common good that's better than what each side could have done in a more ideal way. But I'm not after ideal, going back to the soft drink analogy. What I'm trying to do is make this country better. I'm not trying to make this country perfect because that's impossible. But we've got to try to make people appreciate that saving kids means if they just alter their habits a little bit, for example, like technoference that we have discussed, you and I, Kim, many times, and for the audience, technoference is the idea and concept that parents are fracturing their time with their children because they're involved in social media. And in many studies that came from Stanford and other places, we've now discovered that kids' number one issue when they're growing up in the last 10 years has been they want more time with mom and dad, and they wish mom and dad weren't on their devices. And this is something that we can hide and we can duck and we can pretend is not happening, but it is. And if you've ever been to a restaurant, and most of us have, you have seen mom and dad on their phones and the kid on their phone or their iPad, and no one's speaking to each other. That's technoference. And it's having a profound and negative impact on the way families and the way our communities are growing. And unfortunately, since 2010 and the advent of the cell phone, we've seen a slow decay and destruction of the family unit, of pregnancy, of marriage, and we've seen an uptick in depression, suicide, divorce. That is why I want to help.
Very interesting. You know, you and I have talked a lot about the quality of people's social interactions and how that's ironically declined with the advent of social media and these technologies that are supposed to connect us. And they do. I have friends all over the world that I would otherwise not be connected to if it wasn't for social media. You and I both acknowledge the positives of technology. And of course, as a technologist yourself, you not only invent these things, but you promote them. So we're coming from this place of balance and being realistic about technology is not going away. It's not a big, scary boogeyman. And we don't need to fear it, but we do need to be ahead of things. We do need to be proactive. We do need to be thoughtful with innovation, especially within the tech industry. As things are innovating, are we considering the implications on children or on future generations? So, back to this digital bill of rights, one of your principles is the right to privacy. So, why is privacy so fundamental to individual autonomy, to our health, mental and physical? And what are the real life implications if this right isn't protected?
So let me give you a great example. And I do like telling stories, everyone, to explain these issues, because if you just explain them as a bullet point, A, it doesn't go very far, and B, it doesn't really explain the emotional and the far-reaching implication of the issue. So the other day, I was watching a Dr. Phil rerun, and the subject matter was of two kids that were dating, and they ended up creating a little sex tape between them. They put it on their iCloud account, and then they got hacked with a bully from school, and then um, that the little tape they made between each other was shared with everyone, the administration, grandparents, the whole bit. And Dr. Phil was a trying to help them figure out who was doing the hack, and B talking to the kids about what they had done. And it was very interesting because you might have thought Dr. Phil would have been alarmed and would have said, well, you have privacy and you have a right to privacy. But no, he didn't say that. He said something much more profound and more nuanced. And the nuance of this is what I want to teach Americans is where we're really messing up. We're messing up in privacy because this nuance is I don't know why, but we just don't seem to grasp this nuance, which is the kids did a sex tape and thought that if it's in their private domain, what is wrong with doing that? And they knew they had this bully that was already trying to expose them, and they still continued to do it. So the question I have is, did the kids do that sex tape out of common sense? No. They didn't apply common sense. They put something out into the environment that could be used to blackmail them. They were counting on security to keep them safe. And when that failed, their ultimate concern occurred and they got bullied. Now, let us talk about this more fairly. What I want to teach people is how to make the best common sense decision so they don't get trapped. I'm not trying to tell people don't do social media, but I would recommend that you don't show your naked flesh in social media or put your naked flesh in your iCloud account. If you must, and I'm serious on this, if you must have naked photographs of yourself, then you should use a completely private app that keeps those photographs completely inside an app, not shared with any outside item and with a heavy duty encrypted password. I don't recommend it at all. But to put it on iCloud, what? There's no common sense in that act.
Yeah, and how
So
many examples of that have we seen from celebrities to all kinds of public figures who had their intimate images be exploited? And to your point, not a lot of common sense is involved. And, in your story, we're talking about children, but when we're talking about fully grown adults who continue to trust that the World Wide Web will keep their secrets safe, I think people need to understand your message much better in order to understand their risks.
So that's my point. When people say to me sometimes, well, what do you want me to do? I mean, come on, Mark. I mean, you keep telling me how bad everything is, but you're not making it easy. You're not giving me a direct path. You're not telling me specifically what I can do to protect my whole life. And I look at them going, well, I don't know you. Therefore, I couldn't tell you what you need to do. And more importantly, is I'm not trying to frustrate you neither. What I'm asking you is for you to tell me what do you think you're doing in your life that could actually embarrass you? And maybe that's the starting point in which today I'm going to suggest everyone think about this. When you look at your digital life, have you done anything you're not proud of? And if you have, or if you're proud of it, but it could still be used by others to shame you. So think of it differently. You might be proud of what you've put online, but could what you put online be used by others to shame you? If you have that type of content in your social media feeds, I suggest, as America's technologist, as a person who has seen so many people hurt, today you will delete that content from the cloud. You
Mm.
will delete it because you care about yourself. You love yourself too much to actually bet that a really cool guy like myself as a younger man won't hack you.
That's a good way to put it. I talk to a lot of kids and teenagers these days about digital safety, and it's all about speaking to them in a way that resonates with them, things they care about, right? So, depending on the age of the kid, something I've found quite effective when I'm explaining to them, and for a little bit of added context for anyone who doesn't know, I've worked in the realm of child protection, combating child trafficking and exploitation in various realms. So, I've worked undercover with law enforcement. I've seen what children see on the internet, and it's just not okay. But to explain to a child, oh well, it's bad. It could be, it could be used against you, your data, that kind of thing. They don't really get it. But when I tell kids, anything you put on your phone, anything that's in your internet devices could be taken and used against you. So you may think it's private, but I tell them stories about kids like the story that you just told, where their private information was shared to everyone in their school. Imagine your dad, imagine your parents, your grandparents, everyone seeing your intimate photos. They go, because they care about what other people think, but it also puts it into this reality check perspective of, do you really want everyone to see it? Another thing I tell them is, if you were to run for president when you're older, could something be used against you? You don't want to create or post or send anything that would bite you later, whatever you're trying to do with your life. So we have to, especially for young people, we have to help this resonate in a way where not only do they get it, but they care enough. Something I really appreciate about the way you educate is you really you there's some complex ideas here, but you are very gifted at simplifying it and making it very practical for people. And on that note, for people asking exactly what to do, so you had your first book, which has been a huge success. It was published just earlier this year, if you can believe it, Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity. Can you tell us about your next book? Because a lot of people are requesting more guidance and the practical steps of how to protect themselves in the digital realm.
I am really excited about this, because actually I was just okay, I was a little cheeky, just the last answer was cheeky. I think we can all agree with that. So with that cheeky answer, I'm going to now provide a manual to help people handle these issues, and it's going to be called Killer Tech Survival Guide, and I'm very excited about it. In other words, Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity. And if you are a parent, I do recommend you check out the book
Mhm.
because it will really give you some amazing insight as to how to protect your children. And if you are dealing with social media addiction, again, those are the things we discuss in the book, but it's more of a high level view. It's not a practical manual of what are the fundamental steps to take or a bullet point list of all the points. I do have work. There's a lot of work elements in the book. There's a lot of questions I ask you to ask yourself. And I think if you actually were to answer all those questions in the book, you would have actually taken a course in cybersecurity from the perspective of your personal perspective and your personal views, and you would actually know your place in the world in that area. And that's why the book's beneficial. What the book couldn't do, because it would have been too long and no one's going to read a 1,000-page book, I did not, however, try to explain what we could do, each and every one of us, to A, protect ourselves from losing our job with artificial intelligence. B, how do we stop ourselves from getting addicted to social media? What are the best habits we should employ? And if we are addicted to social media, what should we do? Finally, see, and we'll just keep going with this because the list is so big. I want to talk about how people should really look when they buy something, if they can buy a physical copy of it as opposed to a digital copy. I want to explain to people to look for licenses as opposed to ownership and describe what ownership and licenses in the digital world are. I want to go on and really also teach people why it's important they own their own digital information and teach them how to be their own best guide. And you know the old cartoon when you had the little angel on one shoulder and the little devil on the other shoulder? Well, I want to put on your shoulder a little technologist that's always speaking in your ear and telling you don't do that. I want to give you guys a security system so that when you're posting, you hesitate and you don't put something embarrassing into a post that will end up kicking your butt later. I don't want you to be scared of social media or neither. And Kim and I are going to be working very hard on getting Section 230. And this is a portion of the law that the government set up for social media companies and internet companies to make them a utility. But the problem is that you can't be a utility if you become a publisher. And our social media companies really have become a publisher because they're editing and they're editing ideas. Now, I want you guys to think about this. How convenient would it be for the American power grid if the American power grid decided to treat Republicans the way they were treated in this last election and they didn't give electricity to Republicans because they just didn't like Republicans? Could you operate a utility that way?
Mm.
No.
For those
So
who understand,
utilities
Section,
give,
Section 230 shielded social media platforms from liability. Is that correct?
yes,
In addition to being a utility, the big issue with it is that, well, I guess you can explain this much better, but they have the same rights as someone who's just hosting content. But what you're saying is that they're not just housing this content, they're editing it, they're manipulating it. So
that's
it
right.
fall under a different category then.
There is an argument used against the 230 argument that, well, Zuckerberg owns Meta, and therefore it's his company. He can do what he wants. But unfortunately, I blow through that argument very quickly by just saying, then why does he need 230?
Hmm.
He
So
needs 230 because he doesn't want to be sued. Then when he got 230, that allowed him to become a publisher because he had nothing to worry about. He could not only censor, but he could also run the company any way he wanted, and he was protected by the government. That's a pretty good deal. You really got a get out of jail card and you can do whatever you want.
exactly. So
And I think that's really scary. And that is why 230 doesn't work. Um, I think if you are building a social media platform and like Google said originally, we don't want to do any evil. Well, then you don't decide that half the country's views are negative and you don't put disclaimers and shadow ban and do things to people because you disagree with their opinion. I'm sorry, you don't do that. Not if you are a utility, but they were not a utility. And they did decide to personalize their views. They did decide to publish and decide who are winners and who are losers. And because of that, in my opinion, they lose their 230 protection. And if they were in the real world, where they had to deal with lawsuits, they would immediately equalize their views because it's common sense. You wouldn't want to be constantly in lawsuits, so you would figure out a way to make sure you didn't make everyone angry or half the country angry. And when I say everyone, when you make millions of people angry, you would think at some point a business would be worried about having millions of people unhappy with with what you're doing as a business. So this is also a new phenomena where you have businesses that are okay with having 49% of the country hate them. And I personally, being a businessman, cannot understand how you could be in business and be okay knowing that half your audience doesn't like you. So I think we really, as a country, have got to come to terms with how insane this is because now the shoe's on the other foot. And if I see the Republicans doing the same thing the Democrats did, I will be as negative and as vocal as I am today. It's got to stop.
mm,
We've got to stop being mean to people because we disagree with how and what they think.
absolutely agreed. You talk a lot about truth decay as well, and it's that concept of we no longer trust each other. So, with truth decay, and these days, with how you've also talked about how polarized we are and divided in many aspects, a lot of people make assumptions based on their bias or based on their preconceived ideas about someone or about their political views or the repercussions of them based on a little bit of knowledge that they sort of grasp at straws and assume that, for example, you're of a certain religion or political belief or something like that. I would like to see people be more willing to not only be open minded, but be willing to listen to each other. What do you think are some ways that we could minimize truth decay and also reinstill that integrity and trust in ourselves and in each other?
Well, the first piece of advice is intellectually bound. So I want everyone to realize if you're not following me on this first piece of advice, this is really a high level answer. And then I'm going to give you my low level answer. My high level answer is if any American today really wants to know why and what has happened in the last 20 years in America, then they need to start paying attention to both sides of the aisle and start listening very acutely to all the arguments. If you were to listen to every side's argument today, you would be so vexed and so much in the middle, you would not have the capacity to be so negative on either side. I challenge you intellectually to look at the facts with a completely open heart. Take away your bias, take away your opinions, and just look at both sides. And what you're going to find, you would come very comfortably to the middle, most of us. Therefore, what I am telling people on the low side of this is we have got to stop the conditioning. And this was the psyop. This is where social media has succeeded. Social media has so genned us up. And that is a term I use in the book, genned up. We are genned up. What does genned up mean? It means we are so excited because we have been given information that excites us to the core. And we are continuously hounded with information that will create dopamine hits that creates a genned up audience, an audience that just wants to receive the next hit. So you respond to information in a genned up way. You respond in an aggressive way. How many of you will see a social media short and it will just declare one fact, and immediately your your dander goes up, you get all upset, your internals they get knotted up, and you're ready to explode. You've just heard one sentence, and it was your perspective, your view, and someone's messing with it, and you immediately want to go and speak your piece. And by the way, too many of us do that, and that's how we end up saying things very, very stupid things online. My boy, actually, this is true because I've been applying this to me because I've had to, especially with some of the things I've been gone through during this adventure the last 4 years. I've had to learn this rule that I'm about to tell you. I am the worst offender of this rule. Is do not respond to social media posts the day that you read them. Allow 24 hours to go. That is my first rule. And it's so simple. Respond 24 hours later. Don't allow when you've been all genned up, when your biases are all ramped up, when you are ready to fly off the hook. My suggestion is don't. Wait 24 hours. Watch and observe all the views around the topic that you are so worried about. And I guarantee you, 24 hours later, usually, not always, but usually there's a lot more information. There's a completely new perspective. And you will come to the issue in a much more mellow way. And you know what's so cool about that? If you were to speak to someone who had a different view, and if you were more mellow, you would have a great dialogue with that other individual. And if we had that dialogue, maybe both of you would create something even better.
Right. Absolutely agreed. Another thing I see a lot of in my career in social media, people have this idea in general that their emotions somehow affect the situation. So they may be upset or excited or emotionally charged about a certain topic. And it could be something very tragic, like a war and some, genocide and terrible things that are happening. But a well intentioned individual on the other side of the world will be posting or being emotional on social media and also talking about how emotional they are, how the situation is impacting them emotionally, how upset, how charged they are, whatever it is. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I am calling out the fact that your emotions don't affect the situation. Now, I think it's natural for us to be emotionally compelled by things, take some time to figure out what we can do about it, and then go do something. But I'm talking about, by and large, there's a lot of people, especially in America, that get very charged up about things, whether it's politics or something they disagree with, or some thing on the other side of the world that is very complex and that they probably don't know enough about to really have a big opinion on. It's just interesting to me how these emotions can wreak havoc on them. Not only, it takes a lot of time and energy and bandwidth and it can really affect your health, but ultimately that's not contributing to a result. And people just sort of get stuck in this emotional spiral to the point where they're even cutting off family and friends because they're not as emotional as they should be about this situation.
Kim, you said so you've there's so much to unpack in what you're talking about because first of all, we're talking about health. Um, Sadly, too many Americans are obese. Sadly, too many Americans eat foods that actually will help make them more aggressive. Sadly, alcohol is the number one drug used in America, and its number one side effect is aggression. So, and by the way, that's not an original thought from Mark. That's Sir Jordan Peterson remark, and I just happen to really like him. And frankly, I thought that was incredible because I never thought of it that way. He said, "Could you imagine if you took alcohol out of our civilization?"
Wow.
And he said, "Then imagine how few wars we would have." I, you know, what I want people to appreciate is being aggressive and being emotional is usually an excuse not to deal with a subject matter, not to go deep, and not to actually fix something in your life. When you just use your emotions and you run your life constantly in an emotional state, you ultimately will not be able to learn because you're going to be constantly stressed out and you will have issues with trust. You will have issues with comprehension. This is all proven. And it's sad. And again, this is mean, not everyone. Sorry. There's, of course, there's individuals that are all different. But the amount of negativity that is actually brought on by bad health is actually an incredible statistic. And America right now is coming to terms with what has been the emotional and psychological impact of the smartphone since 2010 on society. We are doing studies right now, the long term studies of the last 10 years. And we're also looking at what what has the phone or has the explosion of information made us any better? And at the moment, if you look at the statistics, especially on our health, and this is something that, Kennedy's been talking about in the campaign, but unfortunately his facts are right. And this is stuff that I was talking about with technoference. So I saw these facts when I was looking at technoference. I want to make it clear, I'm not copying anyone here. It just happens to be everything's aligning up. So when you look at where um, where asthma and all of these pre-existing conditions were just 30 years ago compared to where we are today, we have to, all of us agree that the stats show that we've had an amazing increase, almost a 70% increase in these diseases.
Yes. And
And
even
then we see,
conditions. So, in other words, things that are not necessarily genetic, things that are your body attacking itself.
correct. And then, in addition to that, then you add social media, dopamine hits. You add people having a very sedentary lifestyle around technology. And then you talk about them being happy and how happy are people in general. And I'm not talking politics right now. We haven't even started to talk about politics in this yet. So the person in America today, by far and large, is usually got some mild condition or some pre-existing condition. They're mildly overweight and they're unhappy because in their social media feeds, they realize they're not doing as well as some of the other people in their life. So they're striving to better themselves and they are always seeing, because of social media, that there's always someone better than them. And these people then start to feel a little more hopeless in their situation. Then they get information they don't like, and in their hopelessness, they act out because they feel hopeless. They feel unheard. They feel like they're not seen. They feel like society has passed them by. I'm being very general here, and this is an issue that I could spend hours on, but I'm trying to give a brushstroke. And then we bring all that in, and then we bring in an education system that most people don't know even the geography of where Ukraine is, and they don't understand why the Ukraine war started or why NATO pushed Putin, etc. Then they don't understand the geopolitical reasons why this our country feels it has to give money to external conflicts and countries, and they think that it's a bad idea, but they don't even know why it's happening in the first place. And that's unfortunately based on our education system not really giving people a fair chance of understanding the world they live in. And then finally, we come to our families because these same individuals mostly are coming from, and this is so sad, there's more broken homes and there's more homes with stats than ever before full. And I think the stats of a home that's fully integrated is very low. And I'll have to check that stat out. I don't want to say something that I haven't checked in a recent time, but that stat's very low. And so when you look at the amount of broken up families and you look at the amount of people that are hurting, and then you look at social media addiction, then you look at health and you look at obesity and you look at the psychology and how people are feeling today, I am saddened. I started this podcast with you talking about how sad I am. I am very sad because I love these people. These people have to realize that the way I see life as a technologist is I see life as an ecosystem. You know, I've had people tell me when I go and stay at a hotel, like a maid or staff member at the front desk will say, "Oh, Mr. Strauss, it's so nice that you've come to this hotel. We're so honored to have you." And I go, "No, I'm honored to have you help me. You're going to provide me a bed tonight. You're going to clean up after myself. You can provide me breakfast. You're going to allow me to concentrate on my mission, and you concentrate on your mission, and you make my life better, and I make your life better by staying at your establishment and giving you money, and we help each other." But somehow in our civilization, we've forgotten how interconnected we all are. We tend to think celebrities are the only thing that matter, and we don't seem to realize that we're all connected to an incredible web, and we need each and every one of us to succeed. And that is why I am planning, with your help, Kim, to spread this new way of thinking about our lives. We need to be kinder to each other. We need to realize we are all a little bit depressed and we all are searching. And we need to realize that if we're all searching, then could we be a little kinder to each other? And if you happen to be someone that feels that you have been marginalized because of your belief, your sexuality, your gender, whatever it may be. Again, you should be able to speak your mind and be able to have a world in which you don't feel threatened by getting up in the morning. And the mere fact that many of you do feel threatened is a testament to how we have failed with social media, how the government has failed with Section 230, how we have failed to protect Americans, and how we've failed to protect our children. And more importantly, that is why all of you that feel so marginalized need to stop thinking that all of us want to destroy, and we need to start holding hands. And we need to start holding hands even if we disagree with each other, because ultimately, most of us want a better world. And I believe we can get there. It's going to be hard, and we are all going to have to work with each other, regardless of what we feel of each other. What do you think, Kim?
I absolutely agree. And, I think one of the reasons that you and I go so hard on these topics is that a lot of these problems are quite solvable. They're quite avoidable, really. And some of it may be due to negligence. Some of it is because innovation happened and the Constitution wasn't around when the internet was created. So we're trying to catch up as far as how does that work? Who's going to regulate it? What are the rules? How do we stop bad things from happening? And how do we make more good things? But it really does come down to the individual empowerment. And if somebody feels, so earlier we were talking about emotion. What's so interesting, among many other things we could unpack, is that the way they feel often determines the way they live their life. And ultimately, the way you feel is a choice. Now, I'm not discounting things that happen in the world or external environments, but a lot of people have talked to me about how they think I'm supposed to feel about being a woman, about this or that. Like I could name any sort of segment of society that they put me into. And I choose to feel the way I feel, whether that's empowered or fearless or productive or accepted, even though, you and I are kind of foreigners everywhere. But we don't choose to feel estranged by people or look for that type of acceptance and feel like if we don't find our happiest place, this world is not for us. So I think, what I'm trying to put a bow on here is that we want to see the world be a better place. We want every individual to feel empowered and to be empowered, to not let themselves be limited by society or the way other people's emotions are driving them, to not really be as affected maybe by other people's opinions, but also to innovate and work towards solutions that work for everyone, even if that means some form of compromise, even if that means we can disagree on some things and still be allies and friends.
I agree with that completely. You know, to really put a bow on this, and this will be controversial to some, but it's actually I will not back down from this perspective about people. People that wear their emotions on their sleeve and force you in order for you to have a relationship with them to accept their emotion or their view most of the time, not all the time, but the majority of the time, they will be extremely insecure about that perspective. And the reason they're hammering you that perspective is because they want you to actually bolster their opinion of that perspective. They don't realize that, but it's an insecurity. If you're secure with your feelings towards yourself and your identity, you don't go around forcing it on others. In fact, the most secure people, the people we really look up to in civilization and societies, most of the time they're magnetic. You don't have to ask them or go up to them. You just know. You know because they have a sense of an external exterior that suggests confidence, that suggests they just know that they're good with themselves. They're okay with themselves. And unfortunately, Kim, most Americans today are not okay with themselves. And this has come about because we have never been a society that compares more than we do now. The incredible consumerism also means that when you are being a consumer, you're comparing what can I get that is better, best, or worse, and then what I saw. So you're making a comparison because usually, if you've seen a dishwasher, you want an either better dishwasher, same dishwasher, or less good dishwasher. But you have to have seen usually the dishwasher or the appliance that you want. And then you go out and you decide what are you going to buy. So the idea of us not being genuine, that when we come to someone and we thrust our emotions on them and we say, you have to think the way I do, that is not genuine. It is not genuine because just like you choosing your dishwasher, every single human being has a completely different norm. So they're going to be looking at the map differently. So for you to force your view on someone else is going to be artificial. It doesn't matter because that person will never see your view. So what would be more amazing, in my opinion, is if you accept that person has a unique view, like you have a unique view. And if you bring the two views together, you might be able to create a better view. Or you might hate the view, but you've done something productive by determining, I don't like that. So that's something you never have to go back to. But to reject it, to reject notions, to reject people because they emotionally offend you, unfortunately indicates that you are insecure. And that is why I'm suggesting to everyone listening to me today, don't be that person. You can stand back and not prove to anyone that you have to be called something. What would be cooler is if you just inform them by your actions and force them to actually abide by your principles by force of will through the way you act
Mm.
and see people come to you because they see inside you that you are granite. So this excessive emotion usually hurts the person doing it. And you're also creating a boundary between you and the person you're speaking to. And by the way, as soon as you tell someone that you want them to act a certain way, you have defined the relationship and you have put a limit on that relationship. Because how do you know what that person will say if you just allow them to come at you nasally? But if you keep trying to control the narrative, try to control your pronouns, and try to control people, you ultimately are not getting an ideal interaction. You're getting a completely artificial interaction. And that I find is sad because I won't get to know people if they're on the defensive. I only get to know people when they want to speak to me. And I would recommend to everyone, why don't we go back to saying hi to everyone? And why don't we go back to going, hey, they're a liberal. Hey, they're a Republican. I'm don't I don't look at that cover as the assessment of them. I'm going to read their book by getting to know them. Why not? And you might actually like a Republican, or you might like a Democrat. You got to read the book. And today we just read the cover and then we just fly off the hook.
Or
We
just
use our bias.
yeah,
That's it.
we read the reviews and the headlines. We don't even read the cover or the back. That's all such good points. It's so powerful because I think if we could move past these labels and these little boxes we put ourselves in, we could start to expand not only our mindsets, but share ideas. So, for example, getting out of the box of Republican and Democrat, of which I am neither, and I don't want to be associated with either. I'm team humanity. I'm team America. I'm about what's best as a collective, society. So I think if we were to unpack certain, I guess they're called policies, but rights and ideas that should benefit America. And if they were not tied to a political party or agenda, I think people might be more accepting of them. But that's not how we're trained to think. We're trained to vote the party line or vote for our team and be mad if the other team is winning or has some sort of win. So, another thing you talk about a lot is the right to equal access. So, it's a powerful statement on digital inclusivity, right? So, we're talking about equality and the concept that people can determine a lot of what their world is like by the decisions that they make, by the mindset that they have. So, in the digital realm, what does true digital equality look like to you? And how would achieving it transform society?
So the only thing that hangs me up with what I'm about to tell you is what would be the definition of hate speech or speech that we all of us agree should be taken down, which of course would be sexual content. I know a lot of them, but I do know there's a slight gray area of what is hate speech. But if you guys could just allow me the privilege of just saying, I think we all can agree the definition of bad hate speech, of stuff that would absolutely be taken down by both sides, that Republicans and Democrats could agree upon. And if we could have that baseline, that starts my answer. So if hate speech is understood, then really there's nothing a Democrat or Republican could say online, even if it's in bad taste, that should in any way be um, be policed. If the content is actually adult content, then of course it should be policed away from children. But ideas shouldn't be policed. If someone is a communist, a socialist, a fascist, what do you care?
So, what about just complete inaccurate information? Like, aside from hurting people, right? There, or hate speech and things like that. What about someone who is giving false information? At what point do we set guidelines there with people's ideas?
Well, you see, this is what's so interesting, isn't it? So let me ask you a question because because this is so cool. So we right now have a system that YouTube, for example, if all the political YouTube videos that we've all endured in the last 3 weeks all have a disclaimer that there are U.S. elections occurring, and YouTube's telling us the history of elections. You know, there's a little blurb at in every little video telling you that the U.S. elections occurring, and do you want to read more? So my question, though, is this: is so they put this disclaimer on, and everyone is supposed to think, well, because this disclaimer is on, this is a controversial subject, and YouTube is going to be the actual, I don't know, arbiter of truth on elections. I mean, wherever they send you, whatever they say, is that going to be the definitive voice on it? Well, unfortunately, I definitely know a lot of people disagree what YouTube has said on the election piece. So the truth is, no, that's not gospel truth neither. So, what I have discovered, and this is true throughout the ages, if someone is acting up in social media, eventually with comments and with people, they're going to react, they're going to be discovered, and they're going to be canceled by their own stupidity of putting up bad facts. What I mean by that is bad facts cancel themselves automatically. It always happens. So, this idea we have to police with a police force is a very tricky item because where do you stop and where do you begin? So, from my perspective, my question is, unless there's definitive hate speech that we all agree on, both sides, then why does a post have to be taken down if there is a communist idiot that's talking about communism and a fascist idiot talking about fascism? And why do we have to be concerned? It is, and if people are worried that that idea might spread, well, the problem is, and I hate to admit this to everyone, but we haven't stopped the spread of anything. And in fact, with WeChat and all of these alternative social media sites, we just pushed these views.
We've segmented them.
We've pushed them to we pushed them to the dungeon, and that was a really bad thing to do. I don't think it was so smart. I wouldn't have done it because by pushing those views out of the mainstream, you no longer know what's being said. And the best way for a society to cleanse itself is for all views to be posted. Again, within the context of Kim of not bullying people and not terrorizing people. I'm talking about legitimately talking about ideas. I don't see any idea that could be posted that is not bullying and not hurting someone directly is a bad thing.
That's interesting. It does become a slippery slope, and there's a lot of complex issues to navigate through here. I'm going to separate what I think is the biggest, like, defining factor of what's appropriate. So let's take something sort of not that controversial, right? Let's take fitness advice or health advice. And you have, the irony these days, it's no longer about your expertise, your track record. It's really about how well you present the idea on camera and how engaging you make it in order for people to follow you. So someone who's not necessarily qualified as an expert, but has a big following could be seen as an expert, an influencer, XYZ. So let's say XYZ big influencer is sharing health advice that could be detrimental to some people, that could have bad side effects, that could have a bad impact on people. Now, as adults, we should all know better about getting information from the internet. I'm not saying don't get information from the internet. I'm saying we should all know that not everything on the internet is factual, is safe, or is applicable for you as an individual. Now, we could unpack that common sense, but the point is that adults in general should be educated and free to make stupid choices if they want to. However, when it comes to children, that's always like the completely different category there of children don't have that same brain capacity or brain development to understand the difference. They're very susceptible to this information. They don't have a lifelong context to whether or not this information is correct. So then back to what you said about, for example, adult content. In general, are we looking at the internet as a playground that's a one size fits all for everybody? In other words, are we saying that we need to hide some things in the shadow that aren't safe for kids so that we can keep the internet safe for kids? Or are we acknowledging the internet as a whole, the world wide web, like you said, is not necessarily a free for all playground for children? And should we have different standards to whether or not we allow them to access all the information that exists on the internet, which is something you and I are very passionate about?
Tough question. So let's begin with the children. Children should be protected at all cost. In order to do that, do you have to create a different internet in order to do that? Um, Kim and I have actually been in meetings now and actually done a podcast with so I've gone brain to Bark. And Bark is one of the leading software tools to protect children on their devices. What's very interesting in all of this and protecting the children and everything is we always come to the edge of this problem. And the edge is where does the world of adults begin? And where does the world of children end and begin? And where do we protect? And how much of the internet do we shut down for children? Or i.e., how open should the internet be for adults? So, in my opinion, and I know this is controversial, but I'm European from birth. And as a European, um, in public places like public parks and stuff, they don't put as many guardrails up as we do in the United States. They tend to feel that if you're going up a path, they're not going to put a guardrail to diminish the beauty of the natural environment. They figure if you're on a 3 foot path going up a cliff and you could fall off, you know the risk of that, and they're not going to nanny you to protect you on that path. You have to make a common sense decision. Am I old enough? Can I go up that path? And they recommend children don't go on the path at the beginning of the path. But again, they don't say you can't. Again, Europe's a little bit crazy and different than us. And I saw this in the south of France in this incredible cliff. I couldn't believe it. Kids going up this cliff, no guardrails. Like, oh my gosh, they could fall. But then I started to realize, oh my gosh, they're not, because they've learned how to climb. They're climbing without guardrails because they're using common sense. Oh my gosh, what a concept. People that can take on more responsibility, do something arguably more dangerous in a responsible way, and not get hurt by doing it. I hope you guys are beginning to
That's-
realize the wicked point is
Yeah.
that we need to start to be you start to use common sense. And as adults, we need to start realizing that we need to teach our kids to have this common sense. And we need to start teaching us as adults to realize how addicted we all are to um, digital content. I'm saying digital content, that's from porn to social media to everything that we do digitally, from games, all of us. And I would say Kim has to, I think Kim is guilty. I think I'm totally guilty. I think we are all guilty of having an addiction to this technology. So the question then becomes, and you see why this is so important. So, are we going to walk that path up that cliff with our kids, fully educating them and making sure they don't fall off the cliff? Or are we going to just solo go up that path and expect guardrails to be up there, not educate anyone, and expect everything to be handled through technology and government intervention?
Oof.
Well, guys, I choose no guardrails. I choose educating us because the strongest America is the America that kids and adults can protect themselves. I believe in Americans. I believe in us, and I do not want to rely on technology to fix a problem of willpower.
Oof. Mic drop. That is so good. When it comes to technology, because I agree with everything you just said, and small devil's advocate, because I actually got this talking point from you. When these tech platforms are employing thousands, armies of developers, you say, to design these platforms to be addictive, it's a different risk than, for example, falling and physically injuring yourself and the kid knows better, or next time he doesn't touch the hot stove because now he knows. But with the tech space, that the technoference coming in on their brains that aren't ready for that, it's a different playing field. And like you said, once innocence is taken, it can't be replaced. So the odds are somewhat greater, even though sometimes the digital risks can translate into real life risks. Even if it only stays in the digital realm, those risks are something we don't fully understand. So it's not as straightforward as like a physical risk, like you're saying about falling and possibly, some very big consequences. There's the ongoing impact. We don't have long term studies that are quite conclusive, but every study I've seen about the influence of technology, smartphones, and social media on children has not been overwhelmingly positive. What's your thoughts on
It's
that?
been actually a disaster. But the truth is, to the audience, and um, if I'm wrong, show me. Because right now, every report I read when I was writing the book, every report Kim and I have talked about, because we talk about this stuff, that we're kind of geeks, so we do talk about this cybersecurity stuff in our free time. Ooh, well, that just annihilated our social life. But the truth is, Kim, we've talked about this 100 times.
Mhm.
My question back to you is, and I'm answering the question. My question to you is, are we going backwards in our maturity as a country, or are we willing to move forward and become more mature? Are we going to use the argument that this is hard and therefore we have to have it made easy? or are we going to actually grow up now? We've had this technology for 14 years since 2010. We have AI that now is going to start programming and start replacing jobs. It is the holiday of the past is over. The future is upon us. Everyone's going to be affected by this future. And it's time for all of us to go back to class and to start revamping the way we treat each other. And every American owes it to each other to protect themselves, to protect others, and to help them live in this new era of AI, this new era of fewer jobs, this new era of technologies that can actually snoop on you. And that if we're not all socially in agreement of how to treat each other, then we're going to be in a dystopian, which means a very negative place, a very dark place. And I don't want to live my life in a dark America where people just in China are worried that their neighbors are going to hand them in, that we are going to talk ill about someone because we don't like their politics, so we're going to cancel them. In fact, we're going to dox them and we're going to try to get them fired. That is so evil. And any of you that think that your views are worth doxing someone just because they have different views than you, then I really believe you must have something in your heart that you need to profoundly go and discover for yourself, because for you to do that evil to someone else means you're trying to fill something in your heart. I'm begging you all to realize that this technology of being able to dock someone, be able to hurt someone, was created with the same technology that can be used against you. And that technology that was created can also enhance and destroy your life. And you've chosen to use this incredible force for negative, for bad. I'm suggesting to you, if you have doxed someone in the past, that is really you tempting fate, because one day, if that technology is turned on you, it will make your life a holy hell. It will be something the equivalent of you feeling like you have been completely physically exploited. And I want you to appreciate you will not recover from it instantaneously. It will hurt and it will be around you for years to come. So, yes, I want us all to get a little more mature. And yes, I want us to put social pressure on everyone to stop this behavior. And by the way, we can do this because I can prove it. If any of you want to, Johnny Dollar is an old radio show that started in the 40s all the way to the 60s. You can go to the National Archives and you can look up Johnny Dollar radio shows. Listen to all the sexism and all of the ads and all of the attitudes that we used to have towards everything.
Wow.
We have so changed as a society. We have so matured, and so many things that were normalized in the 40s and the 50s that no longer are allowed and accepted have come about because we've all matured into a better version of ourselves. So I don't want to hear this excuse we can't do it, because we have done it. What I want us to do is to stop complaining that technology's made this more pressing and we have to do it. And I want us to start doing it, because that's the way we're going to protect our children and that's the way we're going to protect ourselves. And for
Mm,
any of you that are that angry that you have to destroy someone else's life, please communicate with Kim and I. Let us help you, because there's got to be something in your life we can help with. Because I want you all to realize I believe that our society has done a lot of damage. We have done damage because we have literally told people it's okay to act out. We've got to make it clear that is very dangerous. And just because you've seen people do it, just because it's happened, does not mean it should happen. And we need to stop. All of us need to stop. And we need to reevaluate ourselves as human beings. Because I hate to break it to most people that have never traveled outside of this country, America is the nicest and the best place I can think of living. and the safest place I can think of living, even with our crime, even with everything that is wrong with this country, because I've been to Europe. I have seen political parties come and go. I have seen myself being one day under communist rule, the next day being under socialist rule. Americans really have no idea about how good they have it. So they go out of their way to really, I mean, crush this country. And that is an area where I, as an immigrant, and as a zero generation American, and having now a family in this country, I am blown away what this country's done for the world. And yes, it's been imperialistic, just like other countries have been. And yes, it's done good and bad, just like you have, Kim, just like I have. Because to grow up means, well, you get into stuff. But you and me are a part of this country, and we are responsible for the outcome in this country. So the way we actually make this country better is to actually bring the temperature of dissent down, and we start to treat each other more equally, and we start talking to each other, even if you hate what the others preach.
Mm,
And more importantly, guys, you know, I was thinking about, and I'm going to just touch on a subject, is that we now have different laws in the country over over a woman's rights. And yet, if we have different states that have different rights, I didn't even hear yet of caravans being set up to take people to the places that their perspectives will be honored. We're so barbaric that we go after each other instead of helping fix the problem. I'm calling everyone on this.
correct. Correct. Our emotions don't affect the outcome and they don't assist the victims. They're not changing things unless we take action. Emotions help if it propels us to take action, but sitting behind a screen being angry at each other is not how we make progress. So I really enjoyed this conversation as always. I want to end with a summary of the Digital Bill of Rights, what it is, why it's needed for those who don't know why they need it. And also, how will that work with the internet being borderless? Is this an American thing? Is this something the whole world needs to adapt? Or how do we protect our digital assets globally?
I'm going to blow you guys away. America is the country that's behind. The rest of the world is way ahead of us. And in most of the countries that are based on, shall we say, our Western standard, we are probably the furthest behind of actually tackling this issue, in my opinion. Some might disagree, but that's my opinion. The reason being is other countries have already decided where what lines they will intervene on. As you know, the EU is intervening, for example, on Steam right now, suggesting that Steam has not made it clear that people don't own their games, and I think that's a very good thing. So, what we need is we need a set of rules that are put into the Constitution that actually create the same rights as humans have in reality. We now have to extend those rights into the digital space. And this is why it's so tricky, because in the digital space, you usually are operating in someone else's owned territory. And that is why we need to create these rules. And Kim, it's an international problem because there's no borders to the software and there's no borders to where you can operate the software. So ultimately, this has to be international. So the Digital Bill of Rights in America will literally, and I probably should do a show. You know what? We should do a show on this, and we will. In the future, we'll do a show talking about the different policies in the different countries and what the differences are. So France has a different Digital Bill of Rights they're working on, as we do, and they have different things that they're actually highlighting. So different countries right now are working on Digital Bill of Rights, and they're also working on access. And they don't call it a Bill of Rights, but a freedom of access on the internet for the whole of the EU. So what we've got to do in the United States is to create rules that are American. And we need to ignore the rest of the world because it's not the rest of the world we're worried about. It's our kids and our society and what's important to America. And I would say that where this is going to be interesting is once we, being one of the most powerful countries in the world, really do this, I believe that if we passed a right to privacy, a right to control one's own data, a right to transparency, a right to digital freedom, and a right to equal access, I believe with those things done, we would be in enough of compliance with the rest of the world that there would be eventually a digital bill of rights that would be worldwide and probably supported by the United Nations. I'm actually in a different area of my life. I'm not happy with the United Nations. However, in this situation, that's the kind of worldwide board we need to pass a digital bill of rights for the world. But I do believe in phases, and until America comes to terms with what is uniquely American and does an American version of it, I don't really see it coming about in the world because I think America has to do it to really make the world realize this is important and it has to be done worldwide.
Makes total sense. That's really interesting. I would love to unpack that with you because one of the most interesting things about the internet is how unregulated it is. And that's a lot of opportunity. And that's also one of the reasons why it's so wild. But there's a lot of ways we can improve things without waiting for the federal government to make the rules for us. So to our discussion earlier about, empowering people to first of all be a little bit less affected by everybody else's opinions or emotions or vibe, and also take that responsibility for themselves to know what's best for them, research, be educated, be informed about what's best for them and their family, and not wait for either the big bad government to say yes or no or to change a rule. So I'd love to see more people get on board with this movement, not only to understand the need for digital safety and its implications, but also what solutions can we, the people, come up with and come together on without waiting for the government to like tell us what to do or give us permission not to. Very interesting conversation.
I want to just suggest to people again, um, if you're interested in this conversation today, Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity, um, which you can buy at almost anywhere. The most important thing in the book, and it's available in audio in the whole bit, is that it actually will explain to you how social media became so powerful, how it actually started how it had and became impactful on your children's lives and your lives. And so, from my perspective now, the best way Americans can help themselves is to, and Kim knows this is my classic speech, so we'll end with the classic. You need to know what your children are looking at. You need to participate in your children's lives. You need to make your children an accountability partner to your phone, and you need to be accountable to your child. You need to teach that child what that accountability means. You need to realize that child can be very helpful in your growth as well as their growth. And yes, a 7-year-old can be your accountability partner if you happen to give a 7-year-old a phone. I hope you haven't, but since I know that the average phone is given at 7, then I suggest that you allow that 7-year-old to be your accountability partner. And what that means is weekly, you sit down with each other's phones and you look at the social media, you look at all the posts, and you look at everything you guys have done, and you talk about it. And what is important, before you start telling your children what they should or shouldn't do, you should start to learn about the type of games, the type of social media, and the type of things they're discussing, and the type of friendships, and the type of things they get into. Because if you just come across saying social media is bad, and the child looks over at you and sees you on your social media, and most of us do that, then you're a hypocrite. But if you actually know the characters, the game, what your child's doing, and you can talk to them about it, help them win, now you're their buddy. And now you have some credibility, some street creds. And now we can have those dialogues. And guess what? What if your child was to help you with your own social media addiction? Because children are extremely pure. And so, in trying to honor their purity, we could get you back to being more pure yourself. What do you think about that? Come on. You all know I'm right. You all know secretly in your heart you're all using social media too much. And you all know you complain about your kid being on social media when you're on the phone yourself. And folks, that's technoference. You're guilty of it, and we need to fix that. So the first thing I want to do for every American that's listening to me today is we need to protect the innocence of our kids. So get busy, get into their lives, get into their phones, and start being their accountability partner. And you can read about more about this in my book. And Kim, that's my best of it. That's the best advice I've got.
Absolutely agreed. I mean, you put a wealth of knowledge into your book as well as your podcast and all your website resources. I highly encourage people to check it out. It's markstross.com. You can find everything on that website. And I'm really excited for your next book because I know that guide is so needed and that people are going to gravitate to once they understand the problem, which I think we're really only beginning to understand as a society. Those of us who are not in the tech space, who haven't been inundated with this, once they understand, then they will need to know, well, what do I do for, if I'm not a techie person, what's the next step? So I'm excited to take this journey with you and support you and help you amplify this message because I really believe in it. You know this, and I want to say this publicly as well, that not only do I believe in you as someone who's qualified to do what you're doing in the world, but someone whose message is so needed today more than ever. And every single day that advances, there are new innovations that people don't even understand. They're not even aware of what they are or what they'll mean in 10 years or 30 years. So I think it's so crucial that we broaden our mindsets around what's going to work for us now and in the future, and what's going to work for everybody, not just ourselves, how the digital world affects us and how we can affect it. So, Mark,
By
thank
the
you.
way, by the way, to the audience, I had to be cheeky with this last comment. Can you imagine what how you would operate your cell phone if you knew your 7-year-old was going to look at your posts?
That's what I was thinking when you were saying that. I was like, wow, that might
I
be it.
just have to say it, and I want you guys to know I'm very serious on this.
Hmm.
I am extremely serious. That will help you with your addiction, and it will help you control what you say. And that's
Absolutely.
why I think it's a great idea. And by the way, you can keep it age appropriate. You don't have to tell the 7-year-old adult things, but they can still be your accountability partner.
Yep.
Please, this has been talked about. We have talked to now arguably thousands of people, and I have not come up with anything better. So you've got the best. So I'm super excited. And just to take us out on that, yeah, you will change your habits extremely quickly if you have an accountability partner.
It starts and ends with us. So let's lead by example, especially when we're trying to set the example for generations to come. So we have the ability to make a massive impact on this now. I really believe that in the realm of digital safety, we could make so much change within the next year or 2 years, definitely within
Yes,
5 years. These are not intangible concepts. We could eradicate child sex abuse material from the internet, and we will. I know for sure in the next 5 years. I think it can be done in 2 years. We could
I agree
completely
with you.
the way we interact
It,
with platforms.
and again, guys, we're not talking like soft drinks, everyone. It's impossible. We're talking about a majority. We're talking about starting. And that's important. And you cannot get upset if you can't fix a problem. By the way, we did have once upon a time an individual came on and they told us about their great idea. And then they said, well, I don't know how to make it perfect. So I guess it's not a great idea. And I just said, no, 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 no. Please don't get don't just get discouraged because we are never going to be able to service everyone. It's how many people can we save? And my question to everyone is, how many is enough? And for me, that answer is so simple. One.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll end on that note. There's so much to think about from this conversation. So I definitely hope it was helpful for people. Please share this information, not only this podcast, but also the information Mark's put out for free on the internet. It's very helpful things. I think it'll help prevent a lot of people from taking risks they're not even aware about if they can be armed with this information. So, Mark, thank you for all the education you share with the world, for this message, and for being persistent with the truth. It's needed in this day and age now more than ever. So I'm honored to take this journey with you, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you.